Hey everybody, welcome to the show, episode 22. Thank you for joining again, and I'm your host, and welcome to Ajustmanrises. As you know, I got 3 links in the description box below. Please take a look at them. The first link is the Bible app. It's just a little assistance on reading the Bible, and today we're going to be in the Old Testament. So that is very crucial and very important that we research, study, and get in our word on a daily basis. The second link is for the shirts. Ajustmanrises t-shirts. Go check them out. The third link is for the book When Enough is Enough, part 2 coming out soon. All right, let's start in the Bible study today. All right, as most of you know of David, and so today is going to be a little Old Testament review, just because the kingdom and how God how He ordered things, how He set things up, was that we have to know what a kingdom looks like. And so in this part about David, what we're reading currently in my Through the Bible app, we're reading into 2 Samuel. And 2 Samuel is named after the prophet Samuel, who was not even born when the first Samuel started. But to focus on what we're talking about today, it's not going to be a long session today. I just want to get you the idea of understanding what a kingdom looks like and why David was so important in the lineage of Jesus and understanding the kingdom and all those things. So we take elements out of there, but we want to take some elements out of his character. As we know, David did a lot of things. We most know him for his sin with Bathsheba, but he did a lot of other things too. We may know about his fight with Goliath. We may know about his fight with the lion and the bear. We know several things. We know he used a slingshot. We know a lot of things. And sometimes the stories that we get to see, we don't get the whole stories, but we have to read the book, read the Bible in order to get the whole stories. But today I want to focus particularly on the beginning of how he got the kingdom and what transpired and his character in it, and why one of the reasons why God still would call David a man after God's own heart. And I'm hopefully by the end of this, just give us some things that we can take out of this lesson of just a few points in life of David that makes us think or how to apply them in our lives today. All right, so let's read. We're going to read a few verses, and I'm going to give you a synopsis of it. So the chapter we're going to start in today or go talk about was 2 Samuel chapter 5. And I'm going to read a few verses, but I'm going to go back and cover some stories of how he actually began to reign as king of Jerusalem, Judah. All right, here we go. Let's read 2 Samuel chapter 5. We're going to read about 5 verses from here. Then all the tribes of Israel went to David at Hebron and told him, "We are your own flesh and blood. In the past, when Saul was our king, you were the one who really led the forces of Israel. And the Lord told you, you will be the shepherd of my people, Israel. You will be Israel's leader." So there at Hebron, King David made a covenant before the Lord with all the elders of Israel, and they anointed him king over Israel. David was 30 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 40 years in all. He reigned over Judah from Hebron for 7 years and 6 months, and from Jerusalem he reigned over all Israel and Judah for 33 years. So just that's like a little very small snapshot of David and how he reigned. No, listen to these ages. 30, he was 30 when he began to reign. He reigned 7.5 years when he was for Judah, and then 33 years, like the life of Jesus for 33 years. He began his ministry at 30. Like there's been a magic number for the significance in that, but let's just look at what happened. So as we know, once David was anointed at a young age to be king when God rejected Saul. After God rejected Saul, Saul was still the king. And God did a series of things in order to get David in the palace. One, he gave Samuel, he gave Saul a distressing spirit, and he needed comfort. And his wise men got David to play the harp for him, so he was in the castle then. And then we have him killing Goliath, which made him son-in-law to them, because he's like, whoever defeats this giant, defeats this man, is gonna have all this in my daughter's hand, all this stuff. And eventually he just stayed with the army. He began to fight for the Lord. And that's the thing, though. That's the difference. And we'll talk about that. He began to fight, and he became notarized for what his skills were in fighting in the army of Israel for God, fighting of God, so that the children can gain the promises, continue to gain the promises that God had promised them. So as we go on and we get to this point, Saul realizes that David is gonna be king. He didn't like that. He wanted to kill him. He chased him, killed him, tried to kill him. He didn't kill David. He tried to kill him. He killed everybody around him. Anybody that helped David, he killed them. Anything. He was trying to get to David. So eventually, he stopped. And once he stopped, we get to this in 2 Samuel right here in chapter 5. He stopped, and when David became, the kingdom was split. And that's the thing we have to read and understand what the timeline. The kingdom was split. And when the kingdom was split, the Judah, he became king in Judah. And while Saul had passed and Jonathan had passed and another son had passed, there were still Saul's children that were reigning in Israel, in Jerusalem at the time. So he didn't notice that. Please read it. He didn't go and take the other part of the kingdom by force. He was very clear on how he treated God's people. If you are anointed by God, and that's many of us are anointed by God to do something, be very careful how we treat those people. They may be doing bad things. Saul was trying to kill him, but David never laid a finger on him. He even regretted just cutting a piece of his robe off. Just cutting a little piece of his robe off. He regret that. He was like, I don't want to touch the man of God. And nobody around me is going to touch the man of God, because God put him there for a reason, and that's what's going to be. He stood by that. Even when he was king in Judah, he stood by that. There was, and if you go back and read the chapters before this, chapters 1, 2, 3, 4, you'll see that anybody that touched the man of God, he killed them. This Amalekite said that he's the one that finished Saul off. He was bragging about it to David. Said, I was the one that did it. I know this because I was there and I killed him. He had fell on his own sword and he was still alive. And he told me to kill him. And so I finished him off. And this is what I got. Here's your crown for you. He was like, nope. Is that what you say? You sure is that what you're talking about? Y'all go ahead and kill him. That's exactly what he did. Like, you don't touch the man of God. Like, do this. And then, just before this chapter, in chapter 4, please go back and read it. Chapter 4, these two people were trying to get in David's good graces for whatever reason. As they were trying to get into David's good graces, they killed one of Saul's sons. They came to his house, snuck in through the door. The person watching the door fell asleep, and they snuck in and killed him in his bed. And they brought his head back to David, and David's like, no, hold on, what's this? They told him what they did. He was like, listen, I don't play about you touching the man of God. I don't play about any of that. I don't play about you doing that. Like, you don't do stuff like that. And that's what happened. He had them killed because they did something trying to get in favor with him. Like, listen, I just because the guy told me that he killed Saul, even though Saul had fell on his own sword, had fell on his own spear, I still took him out. So what you think gonna happen to y'all? Go back and read that in just few verses before what we just read, chapter 4, 2 Samuel chapter 4, and see what he did. What I want to get out of this and want you to see out of this is that David may have done some bad things, in which is recorded. Even a few chapters ago, he was before before he got to be reign in Judah, before he got to be king in Judah, he was with an enemy of the Jerusalem, but he wasn't fighting with them, but he was with them and just in a town. He would just go and kill people, kill other people that were against Jerusalem. He would go and just take them out and then come back and say, yeah, I'm just handling some stuff. He just would do that. He would kill everybody. And so that's even more than the sin of Bathsheba, but we know that because we read that, and that's a highlight of the thing. He killed this, he killed Uriah, and and of course he took Bathsheba. But that was a whole lot of things he did beforehand. It wasn't just that one incident reason why he couldn't build the temple. It was all the blood on his hands, like all the women and children, all the people that he killed was on his hands. But what made David so different is that if he asked God for something or about something, to do something, and God gave him instructions, he always followed those instructions. Now, this is what I want you to really take out of it. He always, no matter all the bad things he did, even with counting the people, but when he was confronted with those things, he turned from what he did, and he didn't do those things again. But the most important part is that whatever he got instructions, he did exactly what God said. That's what we got to really take out of that is God wants us to follow the instruction that he gives us. And some things he may not give us instructions about. Some things, there are cultural, there are legal laws that have been put in place for us not to do some things. But when God gives us instructions on what to do and what not to do, that's what he wants us to follow. And that's what David did. He might have did some stuff. But if he would have asked God first, he knew what God was going to say. But he would have done it. If God, I'm telling you, you go back through the life of David, and the book of Samuel has the big majority of it, but just also in the end of it in Kings. And then you get the Chronicles, and then you get to see all the kings and everybody what they did. So just look at what he did and look at how, if he got instructions from God, he did those instructions. He did those instructions. Just what happened to Saul. Think about what happened to Saul. It wasn't that Saul, did these sacrifices to do this. Is that God told him to do a specific thing. He said, go here and take this out. Go here and take care of this kingdom and these things right away. Go and take care. Go kill all these. Go do this. But kill the animals too. We don't want the animals. But what he didn't do what the instructions said, God. And that's what cost him his kingdom. Because he disobeyed the direct command of God. And that's what I want. That's what makes David so different. Out of all the bad things he did, actually, in recording, he did more bad things than Saul did. But Saul directly disobeyed God. Think about what happened in the Garden of Eden. Everything was fine. Everybody was doing what they were doing. Adam and Eve was in the garden. Eve ate the fruit. Nothing happened. But when Adam ate it, because Adam was directly told by God what was what. And so this is the difference that we see in the instructions of how God laid everything out and how he did. So notice that even though David was anointed king at an early age, he still did what God said. And when he did what God said, everything played out. He became king. He didn't go and take the other kingdom by force. He didn't take the other part of the split thing by force. He didn't do any of that. He waited as he was king in Judah, which is a smaller portion of the city. Only 2 tribes. There's 2 tribes in that area. With the 2 tribes in that area, the 10 tribes were in the bigger part. And eventually, everything worked out to where he was the king over all. He reigned 40 years total. 7.5 years in Judah and 33 in Jerusalem. So the main thing to take out of this is, listen, God has got some instructions for you. He has instructions for me. That is what you must do. No matter what's going on, no matter how many times you fall, how many times you fall in sin, or you do the listen, God, even when Jesus was walking around, he never focused on what people did wrong. He focused on what did he command his people. He's like, the people, the love that you show, they will know you are my disciples. And then he said, if you love me, you will do my commandments. He never focused on the wrong you did. He focused on if you obeyed his commands or not. Even with the woman caught in adultery, how did he say it? How did he pronounce it? How did he talk to her? He was like, where are your accusers? After he said, hey, the first one without sin cast the first stone. And when that took place, we go from there and we see that, hey, they slowly ran away. They slowly walked away. They slowly walked away. They didn't have anything else to say. And he said, where are your accusers? Where are your accusers? And it was like, they're gone. He was like, go and sin no more. But I want you to be sure that what set aside David was that he was after the heart of God. And they even said in his word that he did the instructions God had ordained him to do. He followed those instructions. The fall of Saul was not following those instructions. It didn't add up sin, and he did this, he did that, because I just told you all David did. But what we can do is follow the instructions of God, and that's what we got to get in his word to see what he's saying to us, get in some quiet time, see what he's saying to us, so that we can do whatever God is calling us to do. And that's a lot. That's a lot of things. We should not be idle because God has something for us to do. And I thank you for joining this week.